Good morning, everybody, and welcome to committee. Thanks, Jake. Okay, a little administrative announcement to start the morning. I know we've got Representative Steens and King on WebEx, and I thought Representative Ballard was going to be here today, so 10:30? Okay. Okay, so we'll talk slow for the first 30 minutes. Okay. We do have, because it is Friday, I didn't solicit this, but we have Chick-fil-A lunch coming in at 11:30. Should be enough for probably everybody in this room, so we'll go from there. Like yesterday, my intent is not to rush through any of this stuff, and we'll take the time. We've got the new, I guess, budget format and presentation like yesterday that we're all still getting used to. So I am going to look at my last year's Office of Child Advocate file, and we'll just kind of there. And we will start with Amanda. Are you going to give us the overview on it? All right, thank you.
All right, good morning, committee. Still today, my name is Amanda Prosser, Senior Fiscal Analyst with Legislative Research, and we're going to start off with Office of the Child Advocate. So this agency was originally established by executive order in October of 21 as a division within the Department of Administration's Office of Public Advocate. At that time, the executive order described the purpose of the division was to provide impartial review of the child welfare system as voiced by children and families in Kansas. However, because some felt that effective oversight requires an entirely independent, autonomous entity without being beholden to the agencies it reviews or constrained by internal administrative hierarchies, the 2024 legislature passed the Child Advocate Act, which created this office as an independent state agency. Additionally, the act also specified the agencies within the child welfare system that the advocate was going to provide oversight for. That includes DCF and its contractors, along with KDADS, Department of Corrections, KDHE, and the juvenile court system. Behind me is Carrie Lawnard. She's the office's acting child advocate. This role is ultimately an individual appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate to serve a 5-year term. In addition to her role as the advocate, the agency employs 5 investigators and then 1 administrative position. In the next week or so, the office will issue its formal annual report, but for perspective, during the interim, she testified at Joint Committee for Child Welfare Oversight, and in her testimony then, she described that the office received just under 300 complaints as of the current calendar year. Her testimony described that the agency conduct is the #1 complaint she receives. So hopefully everyone is very familiar with this document in front of you. To build on what the committee heard a little bit about yesterday, this agency is not a fee-funded agency. It is not a biennial agency. This agency is entirely funded with state general funds and is required to submit a budget and seek appropriations for the current year and for the next fiscal year. Because it's a new agency, a lot of the historical graphs in this document look a little wonky. For example, if you want to turn to page 4, you can see that nothing really existed prior to its creation, and then the first full year of expenses in 23. Then you can see the ramp up in 25 through 27 as it becomes an entirely independent state agency and no longer had the shared resources of the Department of Administration. The other increase for the bumps kind of in 26 and 27, that'll be best understood if you want to flip forward to page 6. So the bump in 26 is caused by 2 things. One is just the amount included in last year's appropriation bill was significantly more than the year prior. So you can see the bullet points in the middle of page 6 that describe what was in last year's bill, including the legislature approving 2 additional case investigators and the legislative pay plan. That pay plan is a little bit interesting for this agency. It's going to apply to everyone in the agency except for the state child advocate, the director. Statutorily, her salary, that salary is tied to the base salary of a state district court judge. There was some judicial compensation changes that were enacted in 23, I think, that took effect in 25, that tied a state judge salary to the federal judge pay scale. And her salary is then therefore tied to that. And so that federal judicial pay scale typically changes at the beginning of the calendar year. And the impact of that will be that for this particular agency, salary and wages are likely to increase over time, not necessarily due to decisions by the agency. It's just statutorily tied to that. The other reason why you're going to see an increase in that line graph on page 4 is item 2 here on page 6. That's describing that the agency had about $118,000 in reappropriation. So these were unspent funds in 25 that then went into 26. That bottom paragraph on page 6 talks a little bit about what that money was. It included one of their investigator positions that was held vacant for part of 25, and then they hadn't finalized their case management system until the end of the fiscal year and hadn't expended any of the money that was allocated for that. So what's interesting is the way that the accounting and budgeting systems work in Kansas is that when those dollars reappropriate, depending on how an agency's section in the budget bill is written, those funds can be tagged for a different expense than originally intended. And that's true for this agency because all of their dollars are in one operating account. If you look at the budget bill, it's going to say Office of the Child Advocate, State Operations Account, and it's going to be one big number. It's not split up into all of these budget units that we're talking about. So at the bottom of page 7, talks a little bit about then what they're planning to use these reappropriation dollars for. Mainly what you're going to see is that they're addressing the salary increase for that child advocate that's tied to the judge's salary, and then they're also putting some of those reappropriations toward anticipated increases in rent. Because back in September when the agency was submitting the budget, they were planning to move from the 10th floor in Landon down to the 4th floor, and they're going to see some significant increase in square footage because their staff has increased so much since becoming a new agency. But, of course, I spent all that time describing that to you, but if you remember from the gray sheet from yesterday and the multicolored sheet that talked about the actions that the State Budget Committee took, that special committee on state budget deleted all of those reappropriations, which you're not necessarily going to see in the budget summary because the budget summary is only showing the agency request. But in those tables, that total for reappropriations on page 6, that $117,000 is gone. That covers everything actually for 26. Chair, would you like me to move on to 27 or do you want me to pause for questions?
No, please, let's go on to 27.
Okay. So moving forward to page 8, you're going to see a very similar table that's going to show the next fiscal year 27. At the top, we're starting with the amount that was approved in last year's budget bill for 26. On line 1, there you can see that the agency is submitting one enhancement request. The text below describes that the request in a nutshell. The agency is seeking to address their underestimation of related business expenses with the hiring of those 2 FTE that were approved last session. Those 2 FTE that I talked about earlier, they were included in 26 with an add of about $200,000, but only 20% of that approximately was for business operating expenditures related to that hiring. So pairing that with being a newer agency, learning all about the costs that come from being an independent state agency as opposed to being under a Department of Administration, there were some costs that just weren't accounted for. So in 26, they were intending to use some of those reappropriations to help cover those increased costs. But in 27, they won't have those reappropriations for sure. So what you're seeing in the table is that they're asking for that enhancement request to help their operating budget. The enhancement is kind of divided into 3 categories, which is listed in those bullet points there. It includes professional fees, which the agency indicates is where they budget the cost of their case management system and their translation services. It includes building rent, again, as they move to the larger space, and then the kind of bucket of other contractual services, which is used for a variety of things that is listed in that little paragraph there. And so in total, the enhancement equals about $100,000. But again, I explained something that then the State Budget Committee has since lapsed because they lapsed all enhancements and supplementals. So that is also gone now. And then line 2 and 3 in the tables, those are just showing some smaller adjustments. Line 2 is reflecting changes in the cost indices of employee benefits. That's something that Department of Administration gives out to each agency. It's not really something that's up for debate or chosen by the agency. It's something that's assigned to them. And then line 3 is just indicating that there were some other adjustments in various cost categories, but there wasn't a net increase or decrease from, other than what I've described from the original 26 appropriation. And with that, I can stand for questions.
Committee, any questions? Okay, so Amanda, I just want to make sure I understand the impact of the gray sheet and everything we did in the special committee on development. So if I were just to, and this is hypothetical, if I'm projecting myself in the appropriations committee here in a couple of weeks when I'm looking at this budget, it'll be just like it is on page 8 with the notes about enhancements, et cetera, what's been zeroed out. Okay, so.
Sure. So when you go to House Appropriations, you will receive, and the whole committee will receive, what's called our Budget Committee Report, and it's going to show the actions that were taken by the Special Committee on State Budget, but then also any actions that this committee decides to make, recommendations that this committee makes. And so you'll see all of those details, yes.
Okay. I'm just trying to follow the math, so to speak, on the new way we're doing this. Okay.
Sure.
I appreciate that. So, committee, any other questions of Amanda? And I do think we have Carrie here, so I'm gonna. So for the 3 agencies that we're talking to today, the part of the dialogue that I would like to get to today is we've just heard kind of the budget overview, but from your perspective, what's changed since 2025? What's new in 2026? And any challenges as an agency that we may need to be talking further or working together on? So intended to be kind of an informal dialogue. Like yesterday, we won't take any official action this week on the budgets that we're hearing. We'll put that off until we're, quote, officially in session. So that's kind of the game plan, and we can go from there. So Carrie, welcome to committee.
My apologies. I didn't know she turned it off. So Amanda did an amazing job, I think, at describing the history of our agency under the executive order and the transition now as its own independent agency by statute. And so this has been an interesting, we're essentially celebrating our first year and a half as an independent agency. And it's been a learning process. I think, again, as Amanda described, really understanding budget-wise that move from being under a larger Department of Administration, and then really understanding the costs of what it means to be an independent agency. So I'm here to address some of the questions that you posed. So what has changed since 2025? I think the first thing is that we anticipated an increase in complaints coming into our agency, and that led to us then requesting the enhancement and the ability to add 2 additional FTEs last year, and we are very appreciative of that approval, and it was needed. So we are in the process of finalizing our annual report for 2025, and as we're doing that, the number that we have is that we've had a 60% increase in complaints coming in from calendar year 2024 to 2025. So those new positions have been essential. Something else that has changed since 2025 is that as we were adding new staff, we did have some changes and other original team members that moved on to other child welfare positions in Kansas. And so as we were onboarding, as we were bringing on new folks, we had some changes in our team. So it's just been a process of onboarding new folks and bringing new energy and expertise to the team. Another, I think, big change is we had a 3-year original contract for our case management system, and so last year in 2025, we were in the process of renegotiating that service agreement. Took a little bit longer than anticipated, but we were able to get that done. There was an increase, as expected, in those fees, in that service agreement, which will be an annual fee, so we'll have that for the next 3 years set, and then we'll be at a position where we would have to renegotiate at that point in time. In looking at what's new for 2026, we do have one open position, so the plan will be to get that filled and meet that increased need of the complaints that are coming in. In addition, we are hoping to initiate kind of a process analysis now that we have new folks on board, we have this case management system in place, really to continue to improve our own internal processes and responses to those that are bringing complaints to our agency. And I think foremost is our request for ongoing support and enhancement to support the team that we have on board in the space that we're asking to be able to move to. So in the testimony, I tried to provide kind of a visual of what we're operating under right now. So we have about 486 square feet for a team of 7 right now. And so we are sharing space with the other Office of Public Advocates. And, you know, when we first got started in the executive order, we kind of made things work and we were able to do so. But as our team has grown and to make sure that we have appropriate space for confidential, as you can imagine, we're dealing with extremely important information around child and families. It's confidential, the long conversations, and we want to honor those individuals that we're speaking with. And so making sure that we have the appropriate space that has doors and appropriate, like I said, for my team to be able to serve our constituents. So we are looking at, we're hoping for some space on the 4th floor. So currently we're on the 10th floor of Landon. We're hoping to move down to the 4th floor as some other agencies are moving around. And so that increased space and increased cost is leading to that enhancement request, along with just those increased costs for our case management system, as well as adding on those new team members.
Committee, any questions for Carrie? Representative Turner and then Representative Reese.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. I was trying to, she mentioned the rent also. So as I see it projected, it looks like it's going to go to, where is it? 41,000 is what I'm seeing on page 8. Of course, the current is more in the range of, what is it, 16,000 ballpark? Is that right? Is that the increased rent we're talking about? I'm sorry.
Chair, oh, thank you, Representative. Yes, so we are, when you take our rent plus like the monumental surcharge and things like that, it's approximately going from around 11,000 up to 44,000 or 40,000. So it's a rough estimate based on the square footage. It will also, the space that we're hoping for is also dependent on who also may share that office space. It's a larger area that could be divided.
Representative Reese.
Thank you, Carrie, for the presentation. Can you talk more about the case management system, what it does?
Chair, Representative Ruiz, thank you for the question. So our case management system provides us, one, we have the ability for individuals to submit an intake online through our website. So one, it takes the information that someone may enter in through our website and then is able to put it directly into our case management system in a confidential pathway. So that allows us to gather information up front prior to direct contact. We can also then enter that information based on the concerns that are coming in by phone call or if someone were to walk into our office as well. The case management system allows us to keep track of all communications with individuals, so whether it's emails, phone calls, interviews. We also are able to save our documents in a confidential way that's secured as we're developing our reports. It also has a reporting feature. So when we think about data, that is a system that allows us then to take the information that we're entering and then be able to really pull some hopefully good data that we can report back to you all about the progress that we're making, the impact that we're having on individuals' lives that bring the concerns to us.
Any additional questions? Representative Orpeza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that explanation. And I was glad you mentioned like phone calls and walking in. In addition to that, is this new agency reaching out across the state to ensure that people do know about this, because technology is not always available for those? And how are we advocating for for this new agency to ensure everybody has an opportunity, obviously if needed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative. So outreach is something that we continue to try to prioritize because we know that being a new agency, not everyone knows that we're an available resource to those who are experiencing the foster care system or juvenile justice system. So, for example, this last year, our team members took different turns going to different outreach opportunities across the state. So, for example, DCF had several different fairs across the state. So Hayes, Atchison, Emporia. And so we had a vendor table at those events to provide information to the communities. We also tried to be present at different conferences to provide information to those that are attending those conferences. So, for example, we had a vendor table at the Governor's Child Abuse and Prevention Conference, as well as the Victims' Rights Conference this last year. So those are just a few examples. We know that outreach is ongoing, and so each year we want to continue to prioritize different opportunities that we can reach out to the public.
Any other questions? Carrie, I've two unrelated questions, kind of. One of them is when you kind of digest what Amanda talked about in terms of the conditions that the Special Committee on State Budget set, how do you see that affecting you as an agency? Let's start with that one. And then I want to circle back. I don't want to go into a rabbit hole, but I kind of want to understand your processes a little better. And we'll start there. So let's start with the first part first, and then we'll get into process second, if that's okay.
Absolutely. So, Chair, as far as answering the question about the impact of the decisions that have been made, if we are not reappropriate those dollars or we are not able to receive those enhancements, that significantly impacts our agency's ability to meet the needs. So as I mentioned, we've had a 60% increase in complaints that have come in just this last year. We anticipate that to continue to grow. And so being able to appropriately respond to those complaints, I need to have a team that is fully staffed. So, if for some reason we were not allotted the requested amounts, then that would impact our ability to probably hire or fill that remaining position that's open. Number one. Number two, we wouldn't have the dollars to support the move to accommodate our current staff. And frankly, it's been very challenging, and my team has been very gracious with the space that we've had. And I've been asking a lot of them. And so when we think about just culture of our office and being able to meet the needs of our constituents, staff retention, it will significantly impact that.
So thank you for that. And then the second part is, you mentioned you're working on if I think I heard you correct, you're talking about working on and revising your processes. I don't know if there is such a thing. Do you have a flow chart or some mechanism that you use for training that says complaint comes in, this is the process? I'm curious as to what that is. I know they're not all complaints are not the same, so there's many different paths and pathways you could go. But I'm just kind of curious as a new agency how you're doing with that.
Chair, thank you for the question. And I appreciate that because that's something that our team has, especially as we've brought on new folks, it's been a learning process. It's allowed us to really look at what we were doing before and identifying new ways of doing things. And so as a concern comes in, essentially we're looking at, we triage it. And so that's the role of our intake specialist. And so she's looking at, is the intake within our scope? And is it not? Is it something that we would require an immediate action to try to have impact or hopefully find resolution for the concern that's coming in? Or is it going to involve a much more comprehensive investigation? And so as a team, first of all, our intake specialist is looking at that. She's making direct contact with the individual who's bringing the concern, hopefully within 48, or I should say 2 business days of the concern coming in, gathering additional information. We also have the ability to look at records in advance. So if we have enough information up front, we're able to do a little bit of background work, looking at potentially some DCF records that we're able to check on, court records, that sort of thing. And then once we triage it, we case staff it, and then we're looking at, is this something that requires, like I said, more of an immediate response, or is it going to involve a much more comprehensive investigation?
So at what point in the future, if we were inclined to look at the data that you've collected in terms of just which agencies, I'm curious about, I mean, you were created to kind of help solve a problem. So what parts of the problem are you solving? So is that data available?
Thank you, Chair. We are working on the information. So we do issue an annual report each year. We are looking at finalizing our 2025 annual report that will be on or due before the first day of session, so Monday. So we're getting that finalized for you all, and I'll be more than happy to send it to this committee. And I think that will provide some data and information that you're asking for, Chair. In addition, if there's ever particular specific questions that each of you may have, I'm more than happy to have a conversation and let you know if that's data that we can pull, or is that data that we should be tracking and something that we can try to then do in the future.
One final time, Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just kind of following up on his comments, when Amanda was kind of giving a review, she mentioned there were 300 complaints last year, and the majority of those, and I missed the words exactly, were process related, is what I remember. Did you catch that? And I'm just wondering, categorically, besides process, is that just people frustrated with how long the process takes as opposed to substantive issues? I'm just curious. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, Representative. Actually, the majority of our complaints historically have been around kind of what we would term agency conduct. And that really, that includes some of those process questions. They're frustrated with the process and how their interactions with the individuals that are providing services to them are. And so we also receive concerns around the judicial process. We receive concerns around really if you think about the child welfare system, from the point of initial investigation that may be initiated by DCF or even law enforcement, really all the way to permanency, and whether a child is reunified with a parent or a different permanency option. But the primary concern that we continue to hear is agency conduct, as far as how we categorize concerns.
That's just, they felt like they were not treated fairly or they were treated rudely, those kinds of issues?
That's one very common concern that we hear. Lack of communication, lack of not being treated fairly, not being treated in a respectful manner, not being responsive to communication. Communication is a primary concern that we hear often, whether it's lack of communication and timely communication, lack of content as far as the communication that they're receiving.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Representative Berquist.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. How do agencies or how do individuals know to refer to you? Since you're a fairly new agency, is it something that anything naturally flows to you, or is it something that has to be pointed out, you should get with the child advocate?
Chair, Representative, it would not be something that would automatically come to us. So it would need to be something that someone either helped provide that resource to someone or pointed them in our direction. So one of the data points that we do report on in our annual report is who's bringing those concerns to us. And one of the questions that we ask oftentimes, or we try to ask, is how did you hear about us? Did a legislature provide our information to you? Did you find us through a Google search online? Did your case manager provide you our contact information? Did the governor's office, constituent office, point you in our direction? So we receive essentially referrals or information from people who receive information about our office from a number of different ways. But it would not automatically come to us. So there's not a process that just, a case would immediately arrive on our desk.
Representative Oropeza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in your statement, to follow up with Representative Berquist's question, do you have a flyer, social media type of something that you could provide us with to potentially put out and help advocate as well as inform the public?
Thank you, Chair, Representative. We do. We have brochures that are available. We have magnets. We have a number of different items that we provide to different, like youth, as far as like coloring books and Bill of Rights. And so we have a number of different materials that I'm more than happy to provide the committee and those that would be interested in having that available. And as far as social media, we do have a Facebook, but it's something that we know we need to do better with. So to be able to reach folks that way. And so that's one of the tasks of our new office administrator, that she'll be working on that.
Okay, committee, one last chance. Any more questions for Carrie? Okay, Carrie, thank you for being here. Appreciate it very much. Okay, I think next up we have the Kansas Guardianship Program. That's Connor. It's going to take me a second to organize my paper, so just kind of hang out for a minute.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of committee. My name is Connor Hughes, KLRD Fellow, and today I'll be highlighting the Kansas Guardianship Program budget summary. So the Kansas Guardianship Program ensures that eligible adults without family or financial resources have access to court-appointed guardians or conservators. Adults are typically identified through other state services such as Adult Protective Services, DCF, and KDADS, or are identified by hospital social workers. The program maintains a list of 800 to 900 volunteers who can take wards under their care in exchange for a monthly stipend. And underneath that executive summary on page 1, you'll see 2 tables, expenditures by fiscal year and version, as well as 2 pie charts representing the agency request as a percentage of statewide total. Kansas Guardianship Program is 100% SGF funded. It makes up less than 1% of all SGF and also makes up less than 1% of all funds. Turning over to page 2, you will see a summary of expenditures. The first table is a 10-year expenditure history between fiscal years 2018 and 2027. Underneath that is a dollar amount breakdown of all of those years, and underneath that is a 5-year change, a 10-year change, and a 3-year average. Moving on to page 3, we have another table that is expenditures by major purpose at the top. Underneath that, expenditures by category from fiscal year 2024 to fiscal year 2027. You will notice that 100% of all expenditures fall under the state operations category for this agency. Turning over to page 4, we have a more specific breakdown of that state operations category. We see the expenditures by classification again from fiscal year 2024 to fiscal year 2027. You'll note that just over 50% of expenditures fall under the salary and wages category, and then about 48% fall under the contractual services category, and then there are less than 1% in both commodities and capital outlay. Turning over to page 5, we will see the fiscal year 2026 analysis. So the legislature passed and the governor enacted one bill appropriating and adjusting funding for state agencies. Selected appropriations for this agency include the pay plan increase. The 2025 legislature approved salary increases for most state employees based on the Department of Administration's market survey for fiscal year 2026. For this agency, that increase is $13,511 SGF. There is also a 1.5% SGF lapse that the legislature approved within state operations for fiscal year 2026. For this agency, that was a decrease of $21,569 of SGF. Item number 2 is the guardianship and conservator stipends. So this agency's revised estimate includes a decrease of $51,180 of SGF in stipends for fiscal year 26. The agency has indicated that this decrease is the result of a revised estimate in the number of stipend recipients for the fiscal year. And that's just to get a more accurate estimate on which volunteers are going to be receiving those stipends. Underneath that, item number 3 is travel expenses. The agency's revised budget request includes an increase of $46,380 of SGF in travel expenses for fiscal year 26, including subsistence fees and private vehicle mileage. The agency has indicated that employees require travel on a weekly basis to perform duties such as interviewing and meeting with volunteers in wards. If you will turn over to page 6, you will see the rest of the fiscal year 2026 analysis. At the top, item number 4 is computer services. The agency's revised budget request includes an increase of $24,100 of SGF for computer programming services and computer repairs for fiscal year 2026. The agency has indicated that they have recently undertaken the process of upgrading the agency's outdated database for a new database with enhanced security and informational capabilities. Item number 5 is salaries and wages. The agency's revised budget request includes an increase of $14,215 of SGF for salaries and wages, and this is mainly due to increases in group health and hospitalizations insurance, and this is partially offset by decreases in unclassified employee pay and CAPERS benefits. Next item is professional fees. The agency's revised budget request includes an increase of $13,300 of SGF in professional fees in fiscal year 2026. The agency has indicated that a previous executive director for the agency continues to serve in a consulting role for the program due to a sudden change in leadership that took place across 2024 and 2025. The agency is also required by KSA 74-9606 to receive a financial audit from a third-party auditor on a yearly basis. And the last item is all other adjustments. The agency's revised budget request includes an $886 SGF increase in all other adjustments. These adjustments include shifts in funding in capital outlay, office supplies, and building upkeep charges. And this concludes my fiscal year 2026 budget analysis. I'd be happy to take any questions, or I can move on. All right. If you'll turn over to page 7, you'll see the fiscal year 2027 budget analysis. This is the agency's 2027 revised estimate over the 2026 approved amount. So we see a lot of the same expenditures here. Item number 1 is travel expenses again. This time, this is an increase of $46,380 of SGF for travel expenses in 2027, and that is again subsistence fees, private vehicle mileage, and vehicle rental and travel fare. And that's again for agency employees to travel to interview and meet with volunteers in wards. We again see guardianship and conservator stipends as well. The agency's revised budget request includes a decrease of $28,200 of SGF. And this is again the revised estimate that we saw in 2026 that relates to essentially they are projecting fewer people receiving those stipends for the fiscal year 2027. Item number 3, computer services. This is again, this is a increase of $26,200 of SGF for computer programming services and computer repairs. This is for the continuation of the database upgrade to a new database with enhanced security and informational capabilities. Underneath that, we see salaries and wages. Item number 4. The agency's revised budget request includes an increase of $25,520 of SGF in salaries and wages for fiscal year 2027. This is again an increase in group health and hospitalization insurance that is again offset by decreases in unclassified employee pay and CAPERS benefits. If you'll turn to page 8, you will see the last 2 items for fiscal year 2027. Item number 5, we see again professional fees. The agency's revised budget request includes an increase of $14,900 of SGF in professional fees for fiscal year 2027. This is again attributed to the previous agency director staying on in a consulting role and the statutorily required financial audit that I mentioned in the fiscal year 2026 analysis. Underneath that, we see item number 6, which is all their adjustments. The agency's revised budget request includes an increase of $6,569 of SGF for all their adjustments. These adjustments include shifts in funding in capital outlay, rental fees, office supplies, and general building upkeep charges. And this concludes the fiscal year 2027 analysis, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions? Representative Oropesa?
Thank you for your presentation. I just want like clarification on when you're talking about the 2027 budget, fewer people were going to receive the stipends. Do we have any clarification as to why that is, or potentially?
Mr. Chair, Representative, my understanding is that essentially, as a result of the agency leadership change, the current director, who I apologize, I forgot to mention, is in the audience today with us, essentially went back and reviewed the projected amount of stipends they were going to be offering and the projected amount of volunteers they were going to be offering for these years. And they wanted to be able to provide a more realistic estimate based on what they were seeing. And as a result, they foresee essentially lower caseload, and as a result, less stipends being distributed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one more question. As you talked about number 5, like the professional fees and the consulting, that happened in regards to 24 and 25, and then it continues to mention the financial audit. Does the consultant do both? It just happens to be lumped right in there.
Mr. Chair, Representative, my understanding is the consultant does not do that. Just the reason that these were lumped in is that both of these expenditures were categorized under professional fees. So they're included with each other, but they are not the same person doing both tasks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one more clarifying question. How much does the audit cost?
Representative, I do not have that information on me at the time for the exact dollar amount on that, but I can confer with the agency and get that answer to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Wolcott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also have a question on the stipend. Are those stipends like on a, are they assigned on a person who's in need, or are they assigned to the volunteer? So is it a 1-to-1 ratio volunteer to person in need, or does a volunteer handle multiple people services, and then therefore they would receive multiple stipends?
Mr. Chair, Representative, my understanding is that the stipend is offered to the guardians and conservators. This is a $40 per month per case stipend, and as I understand, there are instances where more experienced volunteers would be given more than one case. However, I do believe that the agency does limit that, and that there are circumstances where that would happen and circumstances where that would be avoided.
Representative Ballard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say that's correct. I serve on the board, but part of that is if you're very experienced. Remember, you have to be appointed by the court. You just can't decide you want to. But in the case that they would be having different individuals, they would get that stipend. It used to be $35. It finally went to $40. Not everyone who volunteers, because they volunteer to do this, receive the stipend. Sometimes they just turn it down. But that stipend was done, like if you have to mail the letters, your mileage to get to and from, because you have to give a monthly report back. So that's what the issue would be, how many you would have. It would be individually, and they may take it and they may not. Okay.
Any other questions? Representative Turner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wondered on the IT things that you mentioned, those costs, is that an allocation from OITS, or is that an external service?
Mr. Chair, Representative, I believe that is an outside service. I do know that the database that they're they have been operating with is about 20 years old, and it was really only rated to last about 10 years. So now they are undergoing the process of bringing in a new one that has is essentially designed to handle more modern times, and that including both security and informationally. And I do believe that is an outside one. I don't believe that is an OITS database.
Thanks. I mean, I see you've got 10 FTE. I didn't know if that included IT. Maybe I should talk to one of both of you. If that included in-house IT people, or if you're getting services from OITS, and that's why I asked the question, I guess.
Representative Reese and then Representative Wolcott.
My question is more for the agency. So if we can, I can wait.
Okay, well then we'll move on to Representative Wolcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the explanation also on the stipend. I would just want to follow up real quick. Do we know what kind of percentages that is on an overestimate? If we're having a number of volunteers, do we know if we're overestimated in 26 by 51,000? Do we normally spend 500,000 on those volunteer funds, or are we normally spending 100,000 on those volunteer funds and we overestimated by 50%? Do we know what that ratio is?
Mr. Chair, Representative, I do not have a percentage on how much they overestimated by. I believe the significance of the changes is particularly due to the change in leadership that recently happened. So I think these estimates are mostly because new agency had a different way of running the agency, and I think they wanted to provide just a more accurate idea of what they were looking at, whereas the previous agency had would have overestimated that.
Thank you.
Committee, other questions? So I think, is Nancy here?
Yes.
Okay. Would you mind just coming up and have a conversation with us? Okay, so just to set the stage, I was looking at my notes from last year on January 17th. I just had them right here in front of me. Representative Ballard is still on the board. Representative Ballard is still on the board. There's no other program like this in the United States. There were 717 guardians in the program, and the executive director had 40 years of, in the business management, 34 years of experience. I'm assuming that's some of your...
So in total, in the fiscal year 25, which includes part of calendar year 24, in 25, we lost almost 90 years of experience between the business manager, the executive director, and we had 2 volunteer service coordinators retire after long service. So there's been quite a bit of change. So, yeah.
I'm going to hold my 3 questions, and I'm going to defer to Representative Reese with hers. But I wanted to kind of just say, okay, I remember this from last year. I remember some of the challenges in leadership and turnover. So I'm intrigued to hear not only about that, but then the number of guardians in the program and that kind of stuff. So
We've come a long way.
your turn, please.
I had some simple, I was wondering how many guardians and conservators or conservators there are.
So roughly we have about 900 on the rolls. We have about 800 active volunteers. Not every volunteer has just one case. We have some that have more than one. And again, it's kind of at the discretion of the agency if we ask somebody to do another case. In reference to your question about the stipends, in order for a volunteer to get the stipend, they have to submit a monthly report. Not everybody is compliant with that. Some choose not to be compliant. Our volunteer service coordinators, we really like to get those reports because if something happens to the guardian throughout that year of service and we have to submit an annual report to the court to do a successor guardianship or a final report, we need the information on those reports to do that. So we have made a very strong effort to get those reports. Our volunteer service coordinators reach out at least 2 or 3 times a year to each guardian that may or may not be current on their volunteer reports and encourage them very strongly to turn those in so we can spend that money for stipends. $40 is not enough to cover what they do voluntarily, and we are unique. We went to national conference in October, and we get asked a lot of questions of how do you get people to do that for free? I said, Kansas is just a great state. So they're kind of jealous of us, but our surrounding states, they all pay significantly more out of pocket for those services.
Thank you. I had some follow-up questions.
Sure, please.
I'm sorry, what was your name? It's
Nancy.
okay. Nancy, I know that Kansas, this is a very unique program in the country. I feel sad for other people who need guardians or have guardians that are not as meticulous about their service to the person that they are the guardian for or conservator for. And I hear more about folks who are not part of the program, but they have family members, lawyers, somebody else that's been assigned through the court, to be a guardian. And if you had a magic wand, would you bring all of that under the Kansas program?
That's probably thousands of cases, and so I'd be asking for a lot more money because we're not rich by any means, but I don't know how to answer that without knowing the total number of cases. The Office of Judicial Administration received a grant, and they are in the process of identifying how many guardianship conservatorship cases are across the state. So hopefully within the next 2 to 3 years, we'll have more information regarding that. I can tell you that the cases that we get come through APS and the state hospital social workers, and they are becoming more and more challenging. We get cases out of foster care. They're transitioning from foster care to adulthood. And so those cases, those young people often have more challenging behavioral issues, placement issues, a lot more stressful family dynamics that, asking a volunteer to take that on is a lot. Y'all passed House Bill 2359 last year with no funding for that. So we're making do with what we have. But in that bill, APS is having to be a lot more diligent in making sure that less restrictive options have been tried. So if somebody doesn't necessarily need a guardian, but they need somebody to be a supported decision maker, that would be what would be put in place. So they have to put in their petition why those less restrictive options were not successful. And there are some people who will always need a guardian, but there are some folks that with outside support, they can make good decisions. They just need somebody to kind of bounce that idea off of or help with their finances. So.
I'm also hearing that guardians that are appointed through legal means, through the courts or whatever, that guardian is not required to see their appointee very often, not even once a month.
So we encourage our volunteers to have contact with their person once a month. In some cases where the person is not physically able to communicate, or maybe the behaviors are increased if the guardian shows up, they have contact with the facility staff or the agency staff. They have contact regarding that person somehow, some way. COVID taught us a lot. We can do a lot of stuff by virtual calls, which is helpful. We also want to maintain the volunteer's safety. In some cases, we have some very sensitive cases that having the guardian have contact with the person could put their person may be in danger, or if it has been shown that that person has an increase in behaviors when the guardian shows up because they see them as an authority figure, not somebody who's there to help them. We try to mediate that so that the person served gets the best quality advocate, but yet we maintain the safety of that volunteer.
My last question. My understanding is also that under the guardianship program, background checks are done, but other guardians outside of the program, that is not required,
So
nor for the
interesting.
conservator.
So interesting that you should bring that up. We've had that discussion in our office more than once this week, probably 10 times. So in the new statute, it says that there has to be a background check. That person needs to be free of criminal history, not on the adult or child registries, all those things. So we file for an adult and child registry background check on our volunteers when they are onboarded. We also do one through IntelliCore, which is a criminal background check, and that costs us about $30 per person, average. With the new statute, it is required that you have proof of that. So I was told by an attorney this week that families didn't necessarily, if they were going to be the guardian, didn't need to have a background check. And I said, wait a minute, they're usually the reason they're in our program. And so we typically don't appoint family members, but we are within our office currently, if there has not been a background check done on the volunteer in the last 11 months, we're resubmitting that so that we can have that validation for the DCF attorney when they go to the court. Because I don't want to have to explain to a judge why one wasn't done. And $30 is a small price to pay if it keeps somebody safe from having, somebody who could be a repeat offender. But every attorney and every judge is kind of interpreting that differently. We have not had a case yet go through the court. Of course, we're only 9 days into the year, so we were supposed to have one Monday, and that gentleman passed. So I think we have another one on our books for later this month. And so once we get a few cases under our belt to kind of see how that goes, that will make a difference. The other addition to the new statute is everybody's going to have a guardianship plan. So I don't know if you're all familiar with care plans for folks in nursing facilities or the person-centered support plan for folks that receive services from an IDD agency. The guardianship plan is going to be essentially the same, but different. So it's going to give that judge a lot more information about what that guardian is advocating for that person, what services are in place. Does it need to continue? What needs to change? What needs to improve? The other piece of that statute that we are kind of liking is that the guardians, or anybody can file a grievance against the guardian through the court. And that system's on that form is on the OJA website and the Kansas Judicial website. But they can file this with the court if they've got an issue with their guardian, because we get a number of calls every week about how I'm not happy with my guardian because they won't let me go buy 6 2-liters of Coke and I'm a diabetic and let me drink it all in one day. Guardians can't keep people from making bad decisions, but a lot of guardians are reported to APS for things like that when it's a safety issue, not necessarily they want to be mean, but it's more of a, if you drink 6 2-liters of Coke and you're diabetic, you're going to probably be in the hospital. And that's not a safe choice. So having that grievance form for those folks that are unhappy, and it's up to the court to decide how they pursue that. That's not up to us. And again, the majority of those calls come from folks that are not associated with our program. They're just very unhappy with how things are going. I have a frequent caller who at least once a month calls to tell me how he's not happy that his conservator sold his house and that the judge won't give him any information. And we have that same conversation. I give him the same direction. Although this time when he calls this month, I can say, you know what? You can file a report with the court. And here you go. So it's just another step in the process, but it kind of gives the person subject to guardianship an avenue to voice their complaint, whether the court sees it as valid or not is a totally different story, and how they process those. We haven't experienced one of those yet either, so it's kind of new.
Representative Wolcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you may have already said this, and I just was really bad at taking notes. There's roughly 800 active volunteers. Do we know how many cases we have, active cases that we're currently out?
So, I have those numbers. Currently, we have 1,113 active cases at the moment. We have onboarded 17 new volunteers since July 1st of 25. We currently have between the 800 and 900. With the new database system, it's hard to capture that data, so we're trying to piece that together, and it takes me a long time to count. So it'll be in the fiscal year-end report, but I don't have it with me today. And we currently have 62 referrals on the books for KDADS and APS. That does not include the successorships, which are included in those active cases.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, Representative Ballard.
One of the things you did not stress as much that I would like you to, which is, those of you, if you've heard me on this thing, this is a program that I dearly cherish, because not only is it unique, but it is providing a service that volunteers usually don't do, and you have to be qualified, you have to go through the courts and everything else. But you didn't cover, a little bit, you did 2 of the service staff, but how many staff do we have that actually works with the volunteers?
So all 10 of us work for work with the volunteers. We all take calls. We all are out there. We have 6 dedicated volunteer service coordinators that we've divided the state into 6 regions, so they cover those areas, but we all kind of overlap. The office and finance manager, she does stuff. The administrative assistant runs our database, so she's involved with the volunteers. We have an assistant executive director and myself. We all answer those calls. We are all engaged. If I could have 5 more people, that would be wonderful, but we make do with the 10 that we have, and we work really, really hard.
And the other thing you probably should notice is that a lot of these people have been there 10 years or more. The majority have.
The volunteers?
Volunteers. And they're very faithful, and like I say, some just will give their reports, but not choose to get a stipend as well.
We have we probably have about 5 to 7% that choose not to take a stipend. And then we have those that they want that stipend and they're really cranky when they haven't figured out how to submit their report, or we didn't get it by the cutoff date for that, check that cutting period. Yeah, we get those too.
And just to brag a little bit on Nancy, you know, it's a director. The other person retired, another person stepped in, did not work out as well. Nancy has been working there already. She steps into it, and that's a difficult position to be in. And she's been able to revamp, keep it going. We didn't lose volunteers, we gained volunteers. It's a whole combination of what it is. It's a program that actually saves the state of Kansas millions of dollars because we're not paying them anything. So I just think it's a program we really should be very proud of, because they have demonstrated how well they do with volunteers going through the courts. To increase that program would also mean a lot more traffic that goes to the courts. And so we'd have to worry about that in terms of their dockets as well. But I would just like to praise
Thank you.
good work that she has done under difficult situations, and the program has still thrived. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Berquist and then Representative Turner.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Would you repeat the legislation that we passed last year that you mentioned to?
House Bill 2359. It's like 300 pages. I can email it to you if you'd like it.
Sounds good.
Yeah. I'll bring one to you next week.
Representative Turner.
Thank you, and thank you for your work. So you mentioned to the other representative how many cases you had. It was 1,000, what was it, 1,100?
So currently, when I checked the database at 5 o'clock this morning, there was 1,113 active cases. But those are folks that have already, their guardians already appointed. So all guardians in the state of Kansas, all conservators are appointed by the court. It's not like you can go shopping and say, yes, I'd like Mrs. Ballard to be my guardian today. Go appoint her. Doesn't work that way. And you're still the guardian, even when you don't want to be, till the court says you're not. So we probably average 4 to 5 new referrals a week. Some weeks it's higher, some weeks it's less. It just kind of depends. But again, with the new House bill, they're having to make sure that they've tried all the less restrictive alternatives and that guardianship is appropriate because it restricts their rights. So.
Gotcha. Where I was going to go with that is, do you, talking about the 5 that come on and some roll off, do you have an annualized kind of what a normal annual case load is?
We average around 1,100 to 1,200 a year. And those cases are with us continually. So like we have some folks that have been with our program, they've had a guardian appointed through our program since like 1980. We have a couple of volunteers that have served more than 30 years. We have some that have served 2 years and are fantastic, but a majority of our volunteers are folks that have retired from a social service type setting, and they just have that passion to be helpful and kind and advocate. And so we latch on to them because we like them. They have some knowledge of the system. And so our agency does everything we can to help that guardian be the best advocate they can, whether that's going with them to court, whether it's helping them fill out the annual reports, going to a meeting with them. We do whatever we can to help make their job easier.
I guess, let me rephrase. So this morning when you looked, you said there's 1,000 or 1,113. So that's a snapshot to me. But over the year, some are come and some go.
It stays pretty consistent. So
The active number stays consistent. But in terms of the whole year, you might have done 3,000 cases, or follow me? Because some
yeah,
So that's what I was looking for, an annualized kind of a.
maybe to answer your question better, we probably get around 300 referrals a year. We probably have 20 to 30 people pass, but we stay around that 1,100, 1,200 mark pretty consistently over the last few years. COVID took out some of our folks, so that made a difference, but healthcare has improved some since then, so.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have one question. I know we're running a little behind. So I hope next year when we're talking about this, we're not talking about more turnover at the staff and that you've.
Oh, no, I'm not doing that anymore.
It sounds like you're on top of that. So I am curious, though. You mentioned the personal support plan. Was that part of House Bill 2359, or was that some other?
So the person-centered support plan is something that the IDD agencies are required to provide for each person they care for. The guardianship plan is going to be required for every new case going forward, but there's nothing that says that the court can't ask a case that was already appointed prior to January 1 to send one of those in.
So it's new, and it's obviously going to increase your workload. What was the authority that created? Was it House Bill 2359 that said the? Okay.
Yes.
So we've met the enemy, and he is us. Is that what you're saying? It's a good thing.
I'm not saying that you're the enemy.
He did not say it.
I'm just
say it for
saying
you.
that there's a lot more responsibility of the court. The court is actually the person, they supervise, they're responsible for the volunteers that are guardians, for overseeing that and following through when something's not right on an annual report. This new guardianship plan and the new guardianship report, which went, I believe, to 10 pages instead of just 2, requires the guardian to provide a lot more information to the court, so the court is way more informed than they ever have been or probably want to be. But
Okay, and I wasn't making light of it.
No.
And because I believe it to be a good thing. I just didn't know what the actual impact to you and your folks was in terms of workload.
so it has increased our workload. It's increased our consumption of Tylenol. But a lot of it is we're not going to know everything until we've had some cases go through the court system, because again, every judge, every attorney interprets that statute differently. And so we have 105 counties. None of them do it the same. So.
One more comment from Representative Ballard.
Make a quick comment. I think when you said turnover, I want to make sure. The guardianship program has not had turnover. We had a person who was the director for over 40 years. That person retired. We hired another person. And that's a very difficult position to come in for someone who started their program all the way through and a new person comes in. So that individual did not work out as well with this program. Volunteers didn't leave. We got rid of her, okay? So as a result, we picked up a person who had been in the program a while, which is Nancy. Nancy came in. But think of 40 years in between. She comes in, she's filling in the position. People are about ready to retire. So those two retire, okay? And yet you have to still maintain your program. So it's not really the turnover, it's the transition between someone there that's been there, established the program and all of that, stepping in and getting it straight. So that's where we are now. Now, maybe you'd like to get those two people replaced that retired and something along those lines. But I wanted to make sure when I heard that's not the problem. The problem was the transition in between, and now we're back to where we were. Okay.
I hope so. I also want to let you know, we got our new case management system. It is fantastic.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Very excited about that.
Thank you for your testimony today. Pardon? Oh, we have one more question from Representative Steens virtually.
Good morning. Hey, Nancy, it's good to see you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You may have said this, and I apologize if I missed it. Is there a number, like a limit to the volunteers, how many clients they can carry at one time or be a guardian over? Do some of the guardians have more than one client at a time?
Yes. So we typically limit folks to 3.
3, okay.
We have some, to go anywhere over 3, they have to have my approval. And that's when we make sure that they're turning their reports into the court. We're getting their monthly reports. They have good communication with the agencies and facilities that the persons that they are already working with. We want to make sure that that is there before we give them additional folks. Currently, we have somebody that has, I want to say 8, but he's a rock star. And he takes on those cases that nobody else wants to touch. So keeping him happy is important for us, but he also helps us gain other volunteers through his work because he's so enthusiastic about our program. But typically we limit it to 3, simply because that's a lot of people to be responsible for. You know, another human being that is not a member of your family, and you're volunteering to do that so that when they go to the hospital, you're getting phone calls. When they have something happen, you're getting that phone call, engaging with them. When they're not having an emergency, it's a lot of time commitment.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think that's it. Nancy, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We're going to move quickly into Office of Veteran Services. I know Molly is here, and we'll go from there.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Molly Pratt. I'm a fiscal analyst with the Legislative Research Department, and I will be presenting the budget request for the Kansas Office of Veteran Services. The KOVS provides veterans and veterans' families in Kansas with advice and assistance in obtaining veterans' benefits and services that are intended to improve the quality of their lives. Aside from assisting veterans in obtaining federal and state benefits, including internment benefits at one of the 4 state veteran cemeteries, the KOVS operates 2 veterans' homes, one located in Winfield, Kansas, and one located on Fort Dodge, that provide long-term and domiciliary care to veterans and, on occasion, family of veterans. In fiscal year 2025, the agency's Veteran Service Program assisted in submitting approximately 17,700 claims to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and this resulted in more than $525 million being paid to Kansas veterans. There are 5 programs for the agency, including the administration or central office. They are currently located in the Jayhawk Tower. However, as you'll hear in a bit, they are in the process of moving to the Land and State Office building. There's also the Veteran Services Program, which encompasses the Veterans Claims Assistance Grant, as well as the Veteran Cemeteries Program, and then the Soldiers Home and Veterans Home Program. On page 2, you'll find just a budget and policy snapshot of the agency's request, and I'll go into that in more detail once we get to the analysis pages. On page 3, you'll find a summary of expenditures, and that continues on to page 4. And on the bottom of page 4, on the expenditures by category chart, you'll probably notice that there is a large decrease in contractual services between 2025 and 2026 and 2027. That is due entirely to the agency expending their off-budget Medicaid funds for contractual services for both the nursing home and domiciliary home subprograms of the Soldiers Home and Veterans Home. The agency is specifically using the Medicaid funds for contractual nurses rather than using the state general fund for those payments. And with that, I will turn to page 8. Pages 5 through 7 provide more detail on the state operations and categories of expenditures and the expenditures by program. Beginning on page 8, though, you'll find an analysis of the Veterans Home and Soldiers Home fee funds. Both fee funds generate revenues primarily from resident fees. However, they receive a small amount of revenue from other sources. On page 9, there's a little bit more detail about the resident fees. Determination of room charges to veterans and eligible dependents is based solely on their ability to pay. Although no veteran is denied admission based on their financial status, the agency did note that it might need to consider raising the rate of fees to account for the increase in cost of healthcare and nursing care. However, my understanding is that the determination of the amount the veteran pays will still be determined on how much they are able to pay. The agency also notes that although it's difficult to determine the ending balance of the funds due to the variability in the main source of revenue, the agency receives funding from other sources such as federal per diem payments that would allow the agency to continue covering the cost of care. And I'll get into that in more detail in fiscal year 27. The analysis for fiscal year 2026 begins on page 10. The 2025 legislature approved an amount of $39.1 million for the agency for fiscal year 2026. This included $15.8 million in state general funds and $2.6 million in SIBF funds. Included within the bill is a 1.5% lapse of state operations funded from the SGF in fiscal year 2026. Item 2 discusses the reappropriations for the state general fund. Those reappropriations totaled $1.1 million from fiscal year 2025 to 2026. Approximately $448,000 was reappropriated from the administration program due to salary and wage savings from unfilled positions. In very recent conversations with the agency, they would like to expend these funds on moving expenses to the Land and State Office building, as well as building or constructing a new bathroom at the Joaquini Cemetery. However, as was noted yesterday, at the beginning of the meeting, so the administration reappropriation, and then the VCAP reappropriation and the unencumbered funds on page 11, they were excluded by the SBC's motions. So the second bullet point on page 10 for the state veteran cemeteries, those are for rehab and repair projects at the cemeteries. Most of those monies were reappropriated just because those projects were still in the planning stages and they were unable to be committed to prior to the end of fiscal year 25. Once again, the Veterans Claims Assistance Program Service Grant reappropriated approximately $163,000. Most of these funds reappropriated due to a balance of $150,000 that was receipted at the end of fiscal year 2024. And members who were on the committee at the time will remember that the agency had requested an enhancement of $150,000 for the VCAP grant in fiscal year 2024. That is why the Veterans of Foreign Wars nor the American Legion were able to include the additional $150 million in their budget for fiscal year 25, which is why it is still reappropriating into fiscal year 2026. My understanding is that those service organizations have since budgeted for the amount. There's also a remaining about $13,000 from the VFW that has since been spent. And the remaining SGF reappropriations are due to unencumbered funds that have since been expended for their intended purposes. Item 3 discusses the State Institution Building Fund reappropriation. The agency reappropriated $18.2 million in SIBF funds. This is largely due to the new Topeka Veterans Home. The 2023 legislature appropriated $17.2 million, or 35% of the total cost, to construct a new veterans home in Topeka. Through the end of fiscal year 2025, the agency has expended approximately $3.5 million on items such as schematic design and architectural renderings. Since the agency does not know when it will receive the matching funds, much of the $13.7 million SIBF will likely be carried over to the next fiscal year. The agency has completed most of the work that can be done prior to receiving the matching funds. The next two items are speak to rehab and repair projects at the Kansas Soldiers Home and Kansas Veterans Homes. Those were reappropriated due to the bidding process. The Kansas Soldiers Home demolition of structures appropriation was reappropriated. So at the end of fiscal year 2025, there was a proviso, the agency had been previously appropriated funding for the demolition of the junior officers' quarters in Walt Hall at the Soldiers Home on Fort Dodge. However, a proviso required that the agency only expend funds to preserve or stabilize the structures. My understanding is the agency is still seeking guidance on how to expend those funds. The Fort Dodge and Waukene Veteran Cemeteries committal shelter doors, appropriations for those were due to the KOVS trying to explore more cost-effective ways to build or to add shelter doors onto their committal shelters for those cemeteries. And the same is true for the cemetery storage and shop building at the Veterans Home Cemetery. The agency is currently redrawing plans to keep the project within budget. Okay, and item 4 just discusses the reappropriation lapse of 1.5%, which totaled a decrease of about $16,250. Items 5 through 7 discuss the all other changes in the agency's budget. Item 5 might look familiar to the committee from last year. This is the exact same item that was requested last year. However, the agency did not receive the federal funds until September 2025. So the agency is requesting authority to essentially expend those funds in fiscal year 2026 for the purpose of expanding the casket and in-ground cremation gardens at the Winfield Cemetery. Item 6 discusses the Soldiers Home costs. The agency anticipates that the average daily census of the Soldiers Home will increase by about 3 patients, including 2 long-term care patients for a total of 90 patients in fiscal year 2026. The increase in patients correlates to the increase in expenditures for cost of care. As such, the agency expects it will spend more on professional and scientific equipment, including items such as wheelchairs and monitors and drugs and pharmaceuticals. Item 7 concerns all other adjustments, which total an increase of $152,000. These primarily relate to increased expenditures out of the Veterans Home Fee Fund, Medicare Fund, due to an increase in the patient census. And this is partially offset by an estimated decrease in expenditures from both of the federal funds for that home. And Mr. Chairman, would you like me to continue on to fiscal year 2027 or stop for questions?
Well, let's go on. Let's
Okay.
It's in 2027.
Cool. Fiscal year 2027 begins on page 14. As a reminder, fiscal year 2027 compares the request to the previously approved amount in fiscal year 2026. So for fiscal year 2027, the agency is requesting funding for 3 enhancements. The first item being a general counsel position, specifically approximately $162,500 SGF for enhancement funding and 1 additional FTE position to create and fill a general counsel position for fiscal year 27. The agency anticipates that the general counsel would do a lot of duties for them. They would interpret contracts between the veteran service organizations. They would interpret laws in the newly introduced legislation in relation to existing statutes. They would draft proposed policies and procedures, and eventually they could start helping out with the veterans claims process. Item 2 relates to the agency's move to the Land and State Office building. The agency specifically requests $77,349 for the increased, to pay for the lease rate at the Land and State Office building. Currently the agency is in the Jayhawk Tower, and they have about 3,200 square feet of space. I believe it's in the first 2 weeks of February, the agency will be moving into the Land and State Office building, and that's about 2,000 square feet of more space. So this amount is only for the increased cost of rent. There is a note at the bottom of that item that says the office space will require minor renovations to create new workspace and enhance securities. The agency would like to use some of their reappropriations from the administration's operations in fiscal year 2026 to pay for that. Item 3 discusses the IT infrastructure upgrades requested by the agency that total $35,758. This has to do again with their move to the Land and State Office building. Currently, the agency manages its own network and data centers, but it will start to rely on OITS a lot more as they come under their umbrella of services. So the KOVS plans to use the hosted data center in the Eisenhower State Office building because it provides 24/7 professionally managed data. And I will move on to the other changes, which begin on page 15. As you can see, there is a somewhat lengthy discussion on the special revenue funds for the Soldiers Home and Veterans Home. This just has to do with kind of what I was speaking to earlier when I was reviewing the fee funds. It's hard for the agency to predict how much money they will have from federal funds and fee funds just due to the variability in how many veterans could be residing at the homes and when they are receipted the federal reimbursement funds. The 3 main sources of funding for both homes, aside from the fee fund, is the Federal Domiciliary Per Diem Fund, the Federal Long-Term Care Per Diem Fund, and the Medicare Fund. So due to all of the variability, the agency request includes an increase of about $713,000 in special revenue funds for both homes above the previously approved amount, to account for an increase in resident population for fiscal year 2027. I can go into more detail on the consensus or the census estimates for both homes if the committee would like. But for now, I'll move on to item 5 on page 16, which discusses the Kansas Veterans Homes Rehab and Repair Projects, which totals approximately $3 million in state institution building funds. This would provide the agency a total of $4.8 million for rehab and repair projects at the KVH for fiscal year 2027. The increase is due to the agency adjusting its goal for certain projects, such as the dining room and kitchen renovation at the Veterans Home, and the agency aggregating a few projects together so that they can eventually apply for federal grants. The first project discusses a memorial walkway totaling about $55,000. As the second item is along the same lines, the agency would like to replace the sidewalk and add a pedestrian barrier at Fort Dodge. That would total about $350,000. It would protect the veterans and the visitors to the home from traffic. If you all have ever been to Fort Dodge, it's right that one of the homes or buildings is right next to one of the main roads. And due to the population, the agency is concerned about that. And finally, for the rehab and repair projects, the large item is approximately $4.2 million for the renovation of the kitchen and dining room. The agency would like to redesign the Bleckley Hall dining room for it to be more resident-focused, and the agency also plans to completely renovate the kitchen in the Veterans Home as it hasn't been updated since 1966. And item 6 just discusses the all other adjustments, which total $123,292, including approximately $122,000 SGF and $245,000 SIBF. The SGF increase is due entirely to an increase in the base allocation for health insurance and CAPERS rate changes, and the SIBF increase is due entirely to the planned construction of a family bathroom near the committal shelter at the Fort Dodge Veterans Cemetery. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Molly. That is a lot to unpack. Committee, any questions? Representative Oropeza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. It's very much appreciated. I had a question for 2027 analysis, the general counsel position. Would that live under the AG's office or separate?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, the agency currently has an Attorney General representative for their office. The agency would like a specific general counsel for their agency that would, be almost like a subject matter expert for their agency.
I'm not going to speak for General Turner, but I did have a conversation with him on this particular subject. So when you're in the military and you think of in a command position, you have your judge advocate general or your JAG. The conversation we had here was, especially with the veteran services organizations and all the different nuances that go into the Veterans Claims Assistance Program, they need someone who's kind of boots on the ground to fight those fires. And that was the explanation that he gave me. So, but thank you for the question, and thank you, Molly. Committee, other questions?
But when we look at this last one, number 5 on 16, can you imagine a kitchen not having been remodeled in almost 50 years? I mean, and
I've seen it in the military, believe me.
Well, yeah, but I think when we look at it, especially when we talk about electrical and plumbing, all of that is, you don't see it, but it's infrastructure, but you need to have it, so. And they serve, I think, in that kitchen, anywhere between 150, 200 or more, in their dining areas.
And I think it was at one time used by the Department of Corrections. There's some really kind of weird nuances that go with that. Molly, we're going to add to that.
I can clarify. I believe the chairman is talking about the Winfield home. I think there was an agreement at one point between the Department of Corrections and the Veterans Home that the Department of Corrections, Winfield, facility would provide food for the veterans at the home in Winfield. But that is not the case anymore.
Thank you for the clarification. Representative Wolcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last year, I remember talking about the new home here in Topeka as well, and sounds like a wonderful project, but kind of had the same status last year, which was we're waiting on the feds to approve that grant before we could proceed forward. Do we have any idea where that process is? Is this a 3-year window, a 5-year window? Could be tomorrow? I mean, do we have any idea on that? I don't know how that works.
Mr. Chairman, I can generally answer that the agency has been moved from a lower priority group. I believe the first year I had this agency was in 2024, 2023, and they were in, I want to say priority group 8. They've moved up into priority group 1, but they're still toward the bottom of the list in that grouping.
I can add some anecdotal information to that. I think it was the year 2018. Again, this is a conversation I had just a few days ago with General Turner. In 2018, there was a similar set of projects, if you will, that hadn't been funded, and then at the time, I guess it would have been the first Trump administration, just put the dump of money and cleaned the deck, funded them all. So and I say that in the way it was presented to me was they're working with our state senatorial officers and in DC to get the funding, and it is moved up in a request, but it could be 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, or it could happen all at once. So that was the best answer that I had received.
So,
Sure, go ahead.
So are we expecting this year as a high probability, or do we have no idea?
I don't think there's any indication. You can't put a probability to it at this point.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Representative Reese?
Can you talk about a little bit about the VCAP program and how that operates?
Yes. Okay. Mr. Chairman, it's been a few months since I've studied the VCAP grant in depth. I'll try to do my best. Essentially, the Kansas Office of Veteran Services is appropriated now $1 million SGF for the Veterans Claims Assistance Program Service Grant. The statute that, and Mr. Chairman, if Jill, the revisor, wants to jump in at any point, she can feel free. I don't want to speak to statutes or anything, but my understanding is that approximately 50% of those funds, any veteran service organization that is congressionally chartered can apply for the VCAP grant. Currently, only the Veterans of Foreign Wars and the American Legion has applied for the grant. So the $100,000 or $1 million is split 50% each ways. $500,000 to American Legion, $500,000 to VFW. At that point, my understanding is the grant is almost like a reimbursement grant. The veteran service organizations have to have their expenditures approved by the KOVS, and they have to provide, I want to say it's about 25% in matching funds or similar funds for similar purposes. And if you want more detail on it, I can absolutely provide the memo or the committee with a memo on it.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's a reimbursement grant, and where is the money sitting, I guess, for the reimbursement? I mean, who pays up front and then gets reimbursed? Is it the Veterans of Foreign Wars or the American Legion?
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to speak to that because I don't have, it's not entirely clear in my head. I believe that all I know is that it is a reimbursement grant, and the KOVS has to approve the expenditures.
Is your question more, is it state general funds or is it a federal fund pass-through? Is that what you're asking? Okay, the source of the funds?
State general fund.
My question is more, if you're going to get reimbursed for something, if I'm going to get reimbursed for something, is it coming out of my pocket or is it coming out of funds that the VA that the VFW have or the American Legion?
No, it's a reimbursement for services provided. And let me give you a real life example. I'm a retired Navy veteran. I use the American Legion and their Veteran Services Officer at the VA in Leavenworth to process my stuff. And it's for, in this case, it's the rep that's at Fort Leavenworth is a retired Navy guy, thank God. Adam Cunningham is his name, and there's one other person in that office. And so when a veteran comes in and needs help accessing all of the different forms you have to fill to process a claim, disability or otherwise, those are the two organizations that help veterans do it. They are in the VA hospitals, and they're spread out geographically across the state. And so they are reimbursed, and it's really for the salaries of the one or two individuals that are in those offices processing their claims. It's about $40,000 a year in salary for the person that does it. So if you came to the Veteran Summit in November, there's some groups that say, hey, these VSOs, these veteran service organizations are making poverty level wages. I mean, you could assert that in some cases, but in many cases, they are retired veterans receiving other benefits. But that's the way the program works. The other nuance that isn't mentioned is the Disabled American Veterans, or the DAV, is not chartered, as Molly mentioned. There's only two that are chartered, and they have to meet those requirements to be able to know how you process a veteran's claim. So that's kind of the way the program works. Does that help? It does not help. So I gave you all that information that didn't help.
Oh, I knew all that information.
Okay.
What I still don't know is where is that pocket of money sitting to get reimbursed from?
So you're asking more of an accounting question.
It's
It's in the Office of Veterans Services.
it's in the veterans budget. Okay, well, okay, I'll tell you.
Representative Ballard.
I'll tell you a little bit that I know about it, because when you asked that question, I was even perplexed. All of this is within, well, let me see. We appropriated that money, and at one point, it was Veterans Foreign Wars had actually come before us wanting the funding, and the American Legion had not presented, or maybe it was the other way around, I don't remember which. And we funded, and instead of giving it to just one, we gave to both. Okay, remember that? Both of those groups within that. So that money, if I'm correct, is placed within the Kansas Office of Veteran Services. And then they have individual offices around the state. And those offices are made available to the people that are no longer in the service if they need services, whatever. So part of this money pays those people to take the claims and do all of that. And then those claims is sent on to another place in order to get the money. But this is for the services around the state. And at last count, there were 11 different areas geographically that were availing themselves to this funds. Okay?
Mr. Chairman, also, I don't know if this will help the representative, but on page 4, under the expenditures by category, if the state aid and assistance section, that other assistance line, that is for the VCAP grant.
Okay, committee, any other questions? I don't believe General Turner is here, is he? Okay. So we are 15 minutes late. Good thing is lunch was 15 minutes late. So before we break, are there any other questions on this one? So again, is it next Friday? We haven't seen the governor's budget recommendation. You slow that down. This is one where the agency was really kind of concerned to some degree that we were getting out in front of the governor's budget recommendation. There will be an opportunity next week to take a look at that with this in mind, to see if there's any, pardon? Next Friday. This is the 16th. Help me with the date, Molly. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think on our proposed plans, we were going to have the committee do recommendations next Friday, but certainly that can change. But to the chair's point, I think what he's trying to allude to is that we are planning to have staff review the governor's recommendations prior to the committee giving recommendations, so you can have that in front of you as well.
So that is
Proposed, but can be changed.
right. Okay, so let's just leave it at that. And it was really the point is that we want to make sure that staff has a chance to review what the governor's budget recommendation might be. I had another thought, but I've lost track of that right now. Okay, why don't we do this like yesterday? Once we concluded all of the agencies, and thank you, Molly. Once we concluded the agency budgets that we took a look at, we took a break and came back and we call it the draft recommendations that we might have, just general discussion on the agencies we looked at, and we can restart that process at 12:30ish or so. Lunch is out here. You can come back in and eat. And everybody good with that? All right, perfect. We are adjourned till 12:30. And everybody good with that? All right, perfect. We are adjourned till 12:30. And everybody good with that? All right, perfect. We are adjourned till 12:30. And everybody good with that? All right, perfect. We are adjourned till 12:30. Back in business, folks. Welcome back. Okay, so I'm going to look to Amanda and Jill again. So restating what we did yesterday at this point in the day, we're not making official draft recommendations or possible proviso language, but I do want to take this opportunity, now that the presentations have been made, to take and go back and look at, and we'll start with the Office of Child Advocate, just to see if there isn't a potential place where you might or could see a potential recommendation or proviso. That's what we're trying to do this afternoon. So, any specific guidance for us, Jill or Amanda? Just simple as that. Okay. Okay. And this may take 5 minutes. It may take 5 hours. I don't think it'll take 5 hours. Okay. Let's go back to child advocate. All my friends. All my friends are leaving me. Okay. Office of the Child Advocate. As I'm perusing the materials we got, does anybody have any thoughts, questions, or hey, we might want to think about? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Orpeza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My thoughts and some things that we should think about again would be for these three offices as well, or agencies, the cost analysis, because it's mentioned in here, and in regards to motor vehicle parts and making sure that we're being cost efficient. And I would make the same thoughts for all three additionals, because I believe the other two have them as well.
Okay, thank you. I am writing some notes here real quick.
Okay, so it was yesterday that some of these agencies, they do car rentals, and some of the agencies maintain their own vehicles. And I started with the mortuary agency, but for these two, it looks like they own their own vehicles. And is that really cost effective for the state of Kansas? And just ensuring that maybe doing things more consistently across, whether it's renting or owning, just making that evaluation and looking at that to ensure that we're doing the right thing.
Okay, any other questions or thoughts? Or Representative Berquist?
Whether it was the Kansas Guardianship Program or the Office of the Child Advocate, the mention of the limited amount of square foot space they were doing office work in left them at about 60 square feet per person, 70 square feet per person. Doesn't sound really very good to me. And especially if you have a growing caseload or an expectation of a growing caseload. But that's their management issue, but it's a dollar issue that's probably going to have to be dealt with sooner or later.
Okay, so as I look at this budget then, was there specific language? Go ahead. Page 7. Yes. Okay, okay, I see your, yeah. So if we just make a note to circle back and maybe consider that.
Sorry.
Reese?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, along with what Representative Berkus was saying, and that square footage piece, it really does not lend itself for confidentiality because of the stories that
My point exactly.
that they will hear, yeah.
Okay. Noted. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Wolcott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's not really a question or a comment on this, but it is on the leasing or the renting. We heard from a couple of the different presenters today moving, and I think we heard that yesterday as well. I mean, is that a common practice for agencies to have this many agencies move in a given year? Is this a direction that
So thanks for the question. I wish I could channel Chairman Waymaster right now and the Special Budget Development Committee. Jill, can you, on the whole, there's a ton of movement going on, so I'm gonna defer to Jill on the what-fors, I guess. Jill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I believe what's going on is with docking being filled, larger agencies are moving into that space, and then it's filtering down. So then there's empty spaces in other buildings. And so in some examples, they're asking agencies to move back from private rental spaces into a state office. So yeah, so it's sort of a domino effect of what's going on with agencies moving.
Thank you. What I've never have figured out, and I don't know, Jill, if you know the answer, is if there ever was a master plan for all of that, it just feels a little bit chaotic, but is there a master plan or is it chaotic? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I believe they started out with a master plan, but I think, as we all know, when agencies are asked to move X, maybe they push back and say that's not the best use of that space for us. So would you consider Y? And so there was a master plan, but then I think you start getting into that push and pull of what is best for my agency, and then we have all that.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you. Thanks for the explanation. Representative Wolcott.
Just to kind of follow up on this, is there, I assume it's going to be in pretty much every budget committee is going to have these same topics, likely at some level. Is there a general idea, and this may be more of an appropriations question, is there kind of a general, hey, here's going to be an X bucket of money that we expect to see, or are we just going to see these on a one-off basis and just see dozens of them?
So just reflecting on the Special Committee on Budget Development, there isn't a master bucket for it. It was just the way it was presented to us. It's in the agency's. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
However, I think it may get to that point because of all the shifting around. We may get to that point for like space for the guardianship program. They're actually located in Manhattan, Kansas. Okay, that's where their office is. They're not in the middle of all of this shuffle. And they're choosing to stay where they are. And what they've really done with that is they haven't had new carpet in 20 years. So they got new carpet, and they had some old bulky furniture, and we had money left over that was reappropriated, and so they got some new furniture. Then they got, what do you call the computers? Not brand new, but refurbished computers for the service people out there. So that's how they've sort of solved that problem. But they're not in that moving cycle because of located in Manhattan, Kansas.
Okay, any more thoughts or question, Representative Turner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question as I'm trying to kind of get up to speed on. So on this particular budget, the 117 was cut in that global. Is that right? And so the rent issue being $54,000 thereabouts would be one that you would take to the larger appropriations and make a case to say we need to reinstate this? Is that what's happening?
Resolution somehow, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, or we move on? Okay, let's close the books on the Office of Child Advocate and flip the page to Kansas Guardianship Program. And I'll give you a second or two to digest what we heard before lunch, and if there's anything that comes top of mind. We still have Connor here. Representative Berquist.
One observation I think that I caught was that there are 717 guardians in the program. There's 800 active, and there's 900 on the rolls. 900 actual active guardians, but there's 900 on the rolls. Sounds like they're indicating there's not an immediate shortage, but they're looking at expanding the role. So it was just interesting to see how many actual guardians there were active and how many are on the rolls, there may be more available right now than there are being used. It doesn't have a conclusion to it.
Representative Ballard?
Okay. With some of the guardians, there have been new ones that they've trained that are on there just in case. Okay, so they're counting all of those as volunteers. And with, how can I say that? You never know when someone else is going to step down, though they stay a long time. So they've been trained because you take them when they want to volunteer, because it could be when you need them, they won't be available. So they have that many on there, but then they have the ones that are actively involved. But they make sure the volunteers that we do have are up to date with what they need to be doing, and that they're certified by the state and all, but they may not have active people to work with at the time. So that's why she'll often say, this is the active number that we're actually working with. Does that make sense? Okay.
Committee, any other questions on the Kansas Guardianship Program? Representative Berquist.
One more, active cases would be active individual persons in need, or could it be a group of, within a family? Would it be 1,113 active cases? Is that individuals served? Okay. Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other, Representative Turner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, on that point, that was kind of where I was trying to go with my question, was because a snapshot is there's 1,100 ballpark cases, but she said they get about 300 referrals, and then, of course, some pass every year. So let's say it's 1,500 on an annual basis. They've got a $1.5 million budget, so what's that, $1,000 a case for the whole package kind of deal? So just a follow-up thought on that. The other part I was going to say is, now I forgot my comment. Oh, to their credit, it looks, they went through and decreased, these stipends. I guess whoever was there before kind of overprojected the cost, and to their credit, they've brought that back to what they feel is a more reasonable level. I assume that's the current director, but.
Not be totally accurate in that instance. It's not that they reworked it, but it was looking at how many, let me see, how can I say that? Let's just say if we had 600 and we did that times 40 a month, we would project how many, if everyone took their stipend and they went through the whole year, how much it would be. But then you have to go back and say, well, if you have 5 or 10% that never take their stipend, but you have to assume they might take their stipend. So then you could reduce that and say, well, we don't usually have this much overtime. So it's not overestimating, it's going with the number you have that's eligible for it each time. And if, say, somebody has 3, but maybe they only take 1 stipend, but you have to add out the number. So it's not overestimating, it's trying to be more accurate with how many, but you never know what it's going to be, because the same person who didn't take it next month may take it this month. Okay.
Whatever the process, they reduced their projected expenses by 50,000, so.
So that's what she's assuming, yeah.
So I'm gonna, before we move on to the next, I'm gonna make one other observation on this particular agency. And I will admit, I can't not do this. So I always try to put myself in the position, I'm sitting in appropriations and I'm trying to present this budget and get it past the entire committee. So I mean, the bottom line is there's a 10%, is that a 10% increase in spending? I think so, roughly. With no enhancement requests. So there are a few of my compadres, and I know Representative Ballard can probably think of their faces, who like to find, even on a small agency where the year-over-year increase is greater maybe than the rate of inflation. I think on this one, the computer services that they're looking at, I don't get those to be, and I would, maybe this is an ask of the agency, there's a pretty healthy increase year over year. Is that expected to be, are we going to sustain that level of 26,000 or whatever it is year over year, or is it like a one-time thing? And then I thought there was.
Is that the one where the refurbished computers?
It's either that or computer systems. I've just outdated database for a new database with enhanced security and information capabilities. So again, we're not going to really mince words on this. I
think part of that is a one-time just to refurbish those kinds of things as well.
I just don't want to get hung up in the larger appropriations committee, but those are the types of questions that you sometimes get asked. So, okay, let's move on. Oh, go ahead. Representative Orpeza.
And I have a quick question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe just for my own knowledge, this is the first time I've ever seen a program agency that does their own audit yearly. Can you explain to me why that is?
They're a quasi-agency.
Mr. Chair, Representative, it is the Kansas Guardianship Program. And sorry, let me pull out the statute. So the Kansas Guardianship Program is considered to be a quasi-government entity.
It's a quasi.
And I can read the statute here if you'd like me to.
I'm sorry, if you just give me I can read the statute myself. If you
yeah.
just want to give me I'll look it up. I was just interested.
KSA 74-9603 does a pretty in-depth description that I believe will answer your question.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that they're doing background checks, and there's probably not very many of them, but it's not in here. I mean, they're absorbing it somewhere.
Okay, noted. Okay, I actually took notes on that myself. I didn't get a total budgetary amount, but it was $30 per check. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Any other? Connor.
Sorry, just to be thorough, there's also another statute, KSA 74-9606 is also worth taking a look at to answer.
Yeah, just comment on that one. They are treated very differently. They're not a regular state agency, and they don't get all the perks that the state agencies get. They only get some. However, the statute does allow them, if there's a 2.5% increase, they do qualify for that. But because it's quasi, they fit in a very unique situation, and every time things happen or laws change, they always have to be revisited as to how does it apply to them, because they don't fit in the regular mode.
Okay, seeing no other questions on that one, let's move into Office of Veteran Services and go from there. So any thoughts, questions? Again, here's another agency to Representative Wilcott's point, moving to the land and building from Jayhawk Tower. Molly, this one's yours, right? So I'm looking at whether it's the SGF reappropriation, the operating expenses, I don't know if that's 26 or 27. Okay. If you apply the global motions from the Special Committee on Budget Development, what does that do? I just want to make sure I'm understanding on that reappropriation of 448,000.
Mr. Chairman, so currently the SBC bill will lapse the $448,706 for operating expenditures from the administration program.
Should have my mic on if I go to 2027.
Mr. Chairman, can I clarify something?
Sure.
The SBC bill will also lapse the unencumbered funds listed on page 11. And I believe the unencumbered funds item and the administration item, those numbers might be combined in the sheet that Amanda gave you yesterday.
Okay.
If that amount looks different.
Okay.
That's the reason. So both of those will be lapsed, as will the VCAP service grant reappropriations.
Okay.
In terms of reappropriations from the state general fund.
I'm gonna speak out loud, and I don't know if there's a way to visually display or show, and it might even be on a spreadsheet. I'm looking for advice. If it's a crazy idea, we'll just kill it. But is there a way to look at any budget, pick this one, and say, okay, here's what they're asking for, and then if you have it on a, say, okay, but then when we apply the global budget guidance, here's what it actually looks like side by side. Is there a way to do that? And I would say pick one agency and maybe we look at that as a draft and see if it's a helpful tool.
Yes, Chair. That'll be contained in that budget committee report that you will get.
Okay.
It's just not something that we usually do right now. So after we get recommendations next week or the week after, we'll send a draft to committee of that budget committee report that's going to show, it's a table that will show the starting balance and the negatives and adds, all that jazz.
All right. Appreciate that. Thank you. Representative Wolcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You had just mentioned a minute ago the administration, the unencumbered, and the VCAP. Did that also apply to the R&R project as well?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, no, as of now, the state veteran cemeteries rehab and repair projects are included in the bill, so the funds will not lapse in fiscal year 2026 because those are for capital improvement projects, okay. And the motion excluded capital improvement projects.
Representative Ballard.
I'm sorry. I'm on number 3, page 11. The last one, the Kansas Soldiers Home demolition structures with $798,000. That's one that I know appropriations will ask us about. Yeah. Because when you read it, it's a little confusing. So can I get an explanation again on that, please?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, so if memory serves, and I will go back and look at the appropriations report too to make sure everything is verified. I believe it was in the 2024 session. Toward the end of this, it might have been in the governor's recommendation that the KOVS was recommended expenditures to demolish the junior officers' quarters and Watt Hall on the Fort Dodge campus in fiscal year 2025. However, a proviso was added at the end of the session that prohibited the agency from making expenditures to demolish those buildings, and instead, the proviso stated that they had to use the expenditures to preserve or stabilize those buildings. My understanding is that there is a conversation happening between the Kansas State Historical Society and the Kansas Office of Veteran Services about potentially transferring those one or both buildings. My understanding is that it's just a continuing conversation.
So, may I? So basically what we're saying is that they can't do the demolition.
Right.
Okay, they can't do it at this time. But the fact that they still left the 798 is if it's going to happen. But you say they can't do it at all. But if they do, the expenditures be made only to preserve or stabilize the structures. So this money would be used then if they don't demolish it,
And this is,
to fix it up and make it usable.
so this is also State Institution Building Fund, so
Mr. Chairman,
please.
might add a little bit more clarification. I do not believe the proviso carried forward into Senate Bill 125 for the 2025 legislative session. But because the agency has been in talks with the Historical Society, my understanding is there are a lot of parties at play. Some want the building stabilized. The agency does not want to ruffle any feathers, essentially. And they don't want to just demolish it, but they also, it's a lot to keep up to, so.
And this is one, per your point, Representative, that we could get information from the agency just as.
The reason why I asked is because these funds were unspent at the end of 25 and reappropriated. And what did we agree? To take the funding from anything that was reappropriated in appropriations. That's why I was asking, because if we're not using it, then it's okay.
So the clarification I would seek from Jill or Amanda or Molly on this one is this is state institution building funds. Are the rules of the road any different with SIBF?
Mr. Chairman, the state institution building funds, as long as they are going toward capital projects, my understanding is that they did not lapse. And Jill or Amanda can correct me if I'm, so they will stay in the fund.
Okay. That makes,
See where I'm going?
I do. I see exactly where you're going.
Because this would be one of those things we would say that's reappropriated funds, and they may decide that that goes until the end, and we deal with it. But if they're not going to demolish it, if they're not going to do whatever, but then the other thing that's confusing to me is transfer of the junior officers' quarters and with local organizations regarding the transfer of Ward Hall. Well, I'm not sure what they're doing with either one of them.
So if I could just clarify, everything Molly has said is 100% correct.
Okay.
If those funds aren't used, they stay in the state institution building fund, they just might get moved to a different account. So if those aren't spent, they stay in that fund, the big fund. But these are separate accounts. And I hope I'm not going to confuse anything, but it might be a little confusing just because the account is called demolition of structures. And I think in 24, exactly like Molly said, they talked about demolishing these two, Walt Hall and the junior officers' quarters, but I believe the community was very interested in seeing if they could save those buildings. And so we put a proviso in 24, and Molly is exactly correct that it doesn't apply now to 26, because we're in FY 26. That was during the 24 session for FY 25, but it didn't ever get carried forward to 26. But I think that she is exactly right. The community was very interested in saving those buildings, so.
You've given me the
Okay,
argument.
sorry, I'll quit.
You've given me the argument in appropriation, should it come up, why that is the way it is, because I wasn't clear. Thank you. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Ann.
Okay. Oh, Representative Reese?
I have a question regarding on page 11 also, for the VCAP. So can you break it down for me so I can understand it better? That this fund is going to lapse because these are reappropriated funds, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, yes. The reappropriations for the Veterans Claims Assistance Program service grant are set to lapse because there were a few exceptions for reappropriations, but none that captured the VCAP grant.
So if I can add, and if I say this incorrectly, so it's unusual because the budget went from 350,000 to 500,000, right? Or a million. It's 750 to a million. So, and they split that number. So it went up by 150,000. The organizations didn't know about it in advance to budget. So it was, okay, here you go. Subsequently, they budgeted. Isn't that the kind of story behind what happened?
Mr. Chairman, yes. And then there is an additional remaining $12,998 that I believe was just, it came in at the end of fiscal year 2025 in June and was not paid until the beginning of July for the VFW.
So may I ask, there's no more money left in there after that, right? Because American Legion spent all their money.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, my understanding is that yes, both the VFW and the American Legion are budgeting to expend their $75,000 each in fiscal year 2026. They just did not have time to budget for it in fiscal year 2025 due to the timing of the various different organizations' budgeting processes.
But they will have this funding, the 75,000 that they're splitting, is that right? Each 75,000 each for 26.
If the funding were restored.
Okay, so then they really have nothing.
Mr. Chairman, the base budget for the Veterans Claims Assistance Program grant is $1 million. So this is just item on page 11. This is just referring to the funds that have not been spent in previous years. But the agent in the bill, there is still a line for $1 million for the VCAP service grant for 2027.
Okay, thank you.
But then, may I think if I'm capping, they each have 75,000 now to spend through 26. But at the end of that, that's the end of their 150 apiece. And so that's why it's going to lapse unless we reappropriate more money. Am I correct?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if I completely followed what the representative was saying.
So this is I think, to take the confusion away, if we go to the state aid and assistance, is it on page 4 that shows?
Yes.
That shows where the VCAP, so if you look at VCAP agency, it's the 1,000,005. So it just shows you that what they're trying to do is they're trying to spend down what's left, but when we go into fiscal year 27, that is where the $1 million that they split comes from. Correct. Am I reading that right, Molly?
Mr. Chairman, so there are a lot of moving parts with the budget, as you all know. So since 2024, the agency has received a flat $1 million for the VCAP grant. That was an enhancement request during the 2024 session. They had been appropriated, I believe, $850,000. It increased to $1 million. That $150,000, they did not get it into their account until the end of fiscal year 2024. The VFW and American Legion, that $150,000, $75,000 would have gone to the VFW, $75,000 for the American Legion. neither of those organizations were able to budget to spend those $75,000. So those VSOs are budgeting to spend it in fiscal year 2026, but the LVC bill lapses the $150,000 in addition to the $13,000 that the VFW just didn't get in time to be reimbursed for. I hope that provides some clarity.
So that means that they don't have the 76,000. If it lapsed, they don't have it to spend. It looks like here that they do have it to spend, but it lapsed, so they don't have it. All that money left.
If the bill as introduced becomes law, that would be the case. But as long as nothing, if during the session, nothing is changed to the underlying VCAP grant, both organizations would still get the $500,000 to be reimbursed in the base budget. It might be more helpful whenever the legislature has a copy or is introduced to the bill.
It's clear as mud. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just going to have to stay up there because I still am not sure. But it totally lapsed. Thank you for asking this question, Susan.
So, if I may, sir. So right now, they have the money because in last year's bill, they were reappropriated the money.
Right.
When Special Legislative Budget Committee looked at everything, and they did this last year too, so you would have seen, agencies would have seen this last year. So this is the second year this has happened. They made a motion to lapse everyone's reappropriation. And the idea is you didn't use that money. You were appropriated that money. You didn't use the money. So you had that, in this case, you had that 166,000 or 163,000 sitting there that you didn't use. And so the thought process is, well, we should put that back into state general fund. And so that in the bill that will be introduced on Monday lapses that money. And so as appropriators, your job is to flag like agency A doesn't really need that money because we've reviewed it, we've vetted it. They don't need that money. We're taking agency A's money away. But agency B told us we need that for X, Y, and Z, and these programs are important because of Y.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I mean, to me, then this is, I mean, in my opinion, this is exactly what happened last year. During the budget process, everybody looked at those and said A doesn't need the money, but B and C do, and D doesn't. And it's just the regular analysis.
Okay. So if we want to keep the money, we're going to have to reappropriate it.
Yes, ma'am, you have to make a
Okay,
motion
got
to
it.
add
I got it.
And I don't remember the exact language. Amanda will write in the report. I mean, from the bill's perspective, I'm just going to strike a subsection. But from the write-up, I think you'd consider it an add back in.
Okay. Thank you. Whew, Lord, that took a while.
Molly, is there more?
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at last year's budget analysis for the Office of Veteran Services, and there is a subsection under the fiscal year 2025 analysis that discusses the VCAP grant. I'm not sure if that would provide any, just visually looking at the budget summary from last year to see that reappropriation then, and to see how that 150,000 carried over into this year too. Yeah. Okay, I'll go ahead and email it to the committee.
Thank you, Molly.
And that will be on page 4.
It had nothing to do with you. We just couldn't understand how this was going. I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, committee, any other questions, comments, or suggestions on Office of Veteran Services? I think we've beaten this subject to death. All right. Okay, so we are going to call a wrap on this afternoon's meeting. I want to thank committee for being here, staff also. Hopefully this will have proven to be a very beneficial use of time, and we carved some time into our schedule for the later part of January and February. So that was the intent of this. So we are adjourned. Thank you.